All right, everybody, welcome to part one of this discussion. The U.S. And the UN, war-waging partners. Since I've been on a kick of exposing the Cold War, uh, this simply has to be discussed. No discussion of the Cold War would be complete without mentioning the UN playing a major, albeit often behind-the-scenes role in U.S. foreign policy, particularly regarding its military operations during the Cold War, right? So let's dive into this. It was hoped that World War I, by the elite Zio-pig criminal bastards that orchestrated it, it was hoped that World War I would bring the nations of the world to desperation, to the point where they would be willing to submit to an international system of government under the pretext that such a system would be the only hope for preventing another world war from breaking out like this, right? Thus, just after this war, the League of Nations was established by our little Zio bastards, the same ones who funded and orchestrated World War I. In many ways, World War I, amongst other things, was a Hegelian dialectic trick to fool the masses into accepting their catalyst for world government, right? But of course, it didn't fly. The United States, in particular, or at least the people of the United States, were very suspicious of it and would not join. That's why, there are other reasons, but that was a big reason why they realized we got to stage another world war, after which time, of course, they created the UN. It was the League of Nations with a facelift, right? Again, touting the idea that this is needed to prevent another world war, yet a third world war. And this time, the trick worked. The United States did join because they put its headquarters right on its front doorstep there in New York. And people thought, oh, okay, well, since it's headquartered here, maybe we can trust it more, blah, 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 blah. And the UN, ever since, has served the function. Not enough to their liking, but nevertheless, incrementally, step by step, it served the function of essentially a world system of government, right? Even though it's not recognized as that, many developments, many strange developments, not just in the U.S., but member states of the UN around the world have implemented policies and programs and passed laws that are a direct outgrowth of UN pressure being put on them to do so, right? Many people have still yet to see, to recognize this fact. The UN has been responsible for all kinds of sleazy legislation, sleazy, policies that various nations around the world have implemented. And we see that demonstrated, of course, most flagrantly with the U.S. The U.S. has been a bitch for the UN, just like it's been a bitch for Israel, right? Same thing. From the word go. In the June 1923 edition of Foreign Affairs, again, the official journal of the Council on Foreign Relations, and at this stage, the Council on Foreign Relations was only 2 years old. It was created in 1921, right? Anyway, in this edition, Colonel Edward Mandell House, the Zio behind-the-scenes mover and shaker for Woodrow Wilson, right, had this to say. If war had not come in 1914 in fierce and exaggerated form, the idea of an association of nations, meaning the League of Nations, would probably have remained dormant, for great reforms seldom materialize except during great upheavals. So he's admitting here that they created the upheaval of World War I with this idea in mind. Oh, they did it for other reasons. All of their scams serve a multiplicity of purposes, but this was a big one. It was hoped that this would be the step toward world domination. It wasn't, but it was a step, right? Leading us closer. Of course, they orchestrated another one. They thought that would do it. That didn't quite do it. It brought them closer to their goal, right? As did the Cold War, which they planned while World War II was still waging. They realized this war isn't going to be enough, but it will give us the state of Israel anyway, and it will take down Germany, something they wanted to have accomplished in World War I. It didn't quite work out. And so the idea has always been, well, we're probably going to need a third world war. And as we get closer now to the next selection, it's very obvious, guys. Trump's the chosen one to bring that about. A third world war. We may very well see such a thing happen under this son of a bitch. But anyway, so back to our notes here. The January 1919 edition of International Conciliation, connected with the Carnegies, this publication, had focused upon, quote, a League of Nations. That was the main theme of this publication, right? A covert letter sent out with this edition, drafted up by the American Association for International Conciliation, headed up by people like J.P. Morgan, began with these words, the introductory letter that accompanied this publication. It stated, the peace conference, at Versailles, where the League of Nations was given birth, the peace conference has assembled. It will make the most monumental decisions in history, and upon those decisions will rest the stability of the new world order and the future peace of the world. They came right out and called it by name, New World Order. Remember all the speeches by Dada Bushy Boy? National addresses wherein he mentioned New World Order numerous times. Every once in a while, guys, they'll come right out and mention by name what their real agenda is, right? The New World Order, that is their name for their Jewish domination of the world, right? Their world government system. H.G. Wells wrote a book in 1939 called The New World Order. Every so often, they actually come right out and call it by name. And here's one example. This is 1919. As early as that date, they're using that very term. Some people think that George Bush coined the phrase. Oh, no. Anyway, who ultimately was behind the League of Nations? Nahum Sokolow, a major Zionist leader of the World War I era, provided us the answer to that question in case you had any doubt. He said the League of Nations is a Jewish idea. We created it after a fight of 25 years. Jerusalem will one day become the capital of world peace. And again, peace in Jew talk means the absence of all opposition, which is why the UN, from the word go, has been pushing for disarmament all over the world, not just of individual citizens, but of entire nations. The UN wants a monopoly on weapons, right? So that no nation can defend itself, even if it wanted to. Even if its sellout leaders, down the line realized, oh shit, we screwed up. We're going to get screwed now too. Not just our populations. Us leaders are even going to get screwed. They could not possibly rise up to fight this system because they stupidly handed over all of their weapons, right? That's what the UN, one of their main goals has been, one of their main aims, to disarm citizenry as well as national militaries, totally disarm them. so that only the UN and its so-called peacekeeping force is armed, right? That's what they mean by peace. Absence of all opposition, even potential of opposition. So they have a monopoly, not just on money, but on weapons and thus on power, right? That's their version of a utopian society. Another Zio pig bastard from this era, Alfred Nossig, made this remark. He said, "It is not till there shall be a League of Nations. It is not until its allied armies shall be employed in an effective manner for the protection of the feeble." Yeah, that's what they're interested in, right? Protecting the feeble. All during the Cold War, they bombed the feeble into oblivion, didn't they? Into submission. The protection of the feeble. Oh, what great propaganda. For the protection of the feeble, he said, that we can hope that the Jews will be able to develop without impediment in Palestine their national state. This is what it was all about, right? At that time, developing their home state. And equally, it is only a League of Nations permeated with the socialist spirit that will render possible for us the enjoyment of our international necessities. Wow. Only through a socialistic, i.e. communistic, system of world government can the Jews be ensured the enjoyment of their international necessities. In other words, to continue to live high off the hog while driving everyone else into poverty. We need a world government system so that we can protect our monopoly and make sure that no one can rise up against us and prevent us from living high off the hog while we drive everyone else into desperate third world status. That's literally what he's saying. It's all about them living a life of peace. Of course, again, the League of Nations failed, right? People of the United States wouldn't join, and so the thing went belly up. In the July 1928 issue of Foreign Affairs, Franklin D. Roosevelt wrote an article in which he stated, quote, "The United States has taken 2 negative steps. It has declined to have anything to do with either the League of Nations or the World Court. These were negative steps," said Mr. FDR. Can you imagine the son of a bitch became president just a few short years later, after having made a statement like this, denouncing the U.S. for not joining the League of Nations and not supporting the World Court? That was a big mistake, he said. The time has come, he went on to say, when we must accept not only certain facts, but many new principles of a higher law. We got to accept new facts that we got to abandon our principles of freedom and justice for all, which never was a reality anyway, but, nevertheless, we got to abandon that to a global system of control. Principles of a higher law, he said. Higher than our Bill of Rights. Oh, really? He wants you to think that, it's something even more grandiose than the Bill of Rights. And yet, look at the crap they've been foisting on us. How much more grandiose do you think it is? He went on to say, a newer and better standard in international relations. Better for who? With the cooperation of others, he said, other Zio ass-lickers, we shall have more order in this hemisphere. Yeah, world government, more order in this hemisphere. The rule of law, or the rule of, military might, right? Might makes right. That's what he's talking about here. the big man on campus with the most guns. We're going to establish peace because we're going to threaten the whole world. Do what we say or else, right? And that's really the message. That was the message of the whole Cold War. Bow to our demands or we're going to bomb you into oblivion. Or just infiltrate your government and create, a coup. Either way, remove your leaders and replace them with our little puppets. Washington and Wall Street friendly Zio puppets. With the cooperation of others, fellow conspirators, we shall have more order in this hemisphere. Order. Well, look back at what came of all this, right? You call that order? More order in the hemisphere. The United States is hated by most countries, guys, in, South America, East Asia, many African countries where we stuck our nose and sabotaged their whole system. They're disgusted with the United States. Fortunately, a lot of them recognize that it's not the fault of the American people. They know it's our corrupt piece of shit, Zio-controlled bitch government. Nevertheless, though, did it bring order in the world? It's brought chaos. Look at the mess this farragon world is in. And all because of these bitch Zio policies, right? And these bitch Zionist organizations like first the League of Nations, later the United Nations, the Council on Foreign Relations, the World Bank, the World Court, on and on and on and on. Interpol. There's no end to it. And has any of this been good for the world? No. The Zio world? Oh, yes, of course. Not everyone else, obviously. Here's a very interesting quote to consider regarding the creation of the UN, right? It's a quote from Lawrence H. Shoup and William Minter in an article called Imperial Brain Trust, the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, and United States Foreign Policy. This was published in Monthly Review Press back in 1977. Here's what the article stated. The planning of the UN can be traced to the Secret Steering Committee, in quotes, established by Secretary of State Cordell Hull in January of 1943. All of the members of this secret committee, with the exception of Hull himself, a Tennessee politician, were members of the Council on Foreign Relations. And most of them, such as Alger Hiss and Dexter White, of course, later turned out to be communist spies, I must point out. Anyway, the article goes on to say, they saw Hull regularly to plan, select, and guide the labors of the State Department's Advisory Committee. It, the Council on Foreign Relations, was, in effect, the coordinating agency for all of the State Department's post-war planning. So there you go. The Council on Foreign Relations, a Zio scumbag, elitist think tank, right? They were the ones instrumental in putting together the UN. And how is it that the Council on Foreign Relations was able and still able to direct the State Department and just about every other branch of the U.S. government for that matter with the manipulative power of a puppeteer? Well, perhaps no one has answered this question any better than Rear Admiral Chester Ward, who himself was a CFR member for 16 years, Council on Foreign Relations member. And here's what he said. He boldly admitted, quote, once the ruling members of the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, have decided that the U.S. government should adopt a particular policy, once they decide that the U.S. government should adopt a particular policy that they came up with, right? The very substantial research facilities of the CFR are put to work to develop arguments, intellectual and emotional, to support the new policy and to confound and discredit intellectually and politically any opposition. There you go. In other words, he's saying they were able to get their policies through, such as pushing the UN, by using all kinds of propaganda bullshit to dress it up to make it look like the best thing since cheesecake. And then, at the same time, to discredit intellectually and politically any opposition, to demonize them, to attack them, to spread dirt about them, whatever, right? Anything they could, any sleazy tactic they come up with to demonize and thus make useless their opposition, right? So no one would listen, to get the goddamn thing through. Oh, and it's not just regarding getting the UN off the ground. A whole lot of Zio policies were pushed through in this country that same way, right? They don't even have to do that anymore because they got the whole bitchin' system so completely under their frickin' control. They're all their little muppets now. But earlier on, they did have opposition, right? But it was very easy to get around that by playing these kind of games. Son of a bitch. Let's have a look at some quite revealing quotes about the UN. Not that we need evidence to show it's a fraud, but it is interesting what many prevalent people have said about it over the years. J.B. Matthews, former chief investigator for the House Committee on Un-American Activities, had this to say: I challenge the illusion that the UN is an instrument of peace. It could not be less of a cruel hoax if it had been organized in hell, he said, for the sole purpose of aiding and abetting the destruction of the United States. Yes, that's exactly what it's about. Here's another one. This is from John Rankin, U.S. Congressman. He said, the UN is the biggest fraud in all history. Its purpose is to destroy the United States. There we go, once again. These same people saw right through it, that it was, well, its intent was to serve many functions, but that's one of the big ones right there, right? To destroy U.S. Sovereignty and make it a minion of this global mechanism for, the Jew world order. President George Bush Sr., speaking at the UN itself back in February 1st of 1992, said, it is the sacred principles enshrined in the UN Charter, which we will henceforth pledge our allegiance. Wow. So, on the one hand, some of these quotes expose the UN for the fraud that it is. Then others are singing its praises, but in doing so, that's exposing it as a fraud, right? He's saying here that him and his Zio buddies' intent was to have the, the U.S. and indeed everyone else in the world pledge allegiance to the UN, to its charter, He called them sacred principles enshrined in the UN Charter. Here's another revealing quote. This is from President Bill Clinton in his State of the Union address, January 27th, 1998. He said, it's long past time to make good on our debt to the United Nations. Oh, so we're in debt to the United Nations and we need to make good on it, huh? In this new era, he said, our freedom and independence are actually enriched, not impoverished, by our increasing interdependence with other nations. Oh, is that so now? Tell me, O wise guru, some more great wisdom, that I mightest write these things down and memorize them and make them a part of my daily recitations when I get up in the morning for my devotionals. He goes on to say, as we move into a global economy, a truly new world, new world order, America must, he said, must stand against the poisoned appeals of extreme nationalism. Here's a former president of the United States talking about nationalism as being extremist and poisonous. We need to submit to the UN and become interdependent with other nations on the UN's almighty oversight. Son of a bitch. Here's another most revealing quote. This is from Curtis B. Dahl, author of FDR, My Exploited Father-in-Law. I quoted from this numerous times before. In this book, he defends FDR, right, and acts like he was a helpless puppet in the hands of his globalist masters that manipulated him. Yeah, whatever. Nevertheless, there's some interesting stuff in there. And here's what he said. This book was published back in 1970, by the way. He said, quote, "The UN is but a long-range international banking apparatus neatly set up by a small group of powerful one-world revolutionaries hungry for profit and power." Can't argue with that assessment. That's one thing he said in there that's absolutely true, right? Here's another one. This is from Congressman Usher Burdick in a speech that he delivered entitled "The Great Conspiracy to Destroy the United States," recorded in the Congressional Record, April 28th of 1954. The UN, wasn't even a decade old yet, not even close to a decade old yet. And already he could clearly see that the UN was for destroying United States sovereignty. Here's what he said. There can be no doubt that there now exists a widespread understanding and agreement made between the agents of this government, the U.S. government, and the United Nations and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, to build a world government and to make the United States a part of it, regardless of our Constitution, our laws, and our traditions. This is to be done, he said, in the name of peace, but will result in total destruction of our liberty. Absolutely. How perceptive of him, way back in 1954. Here's another one from U.S. Senator Barry Goldwater. Yeah, he was a Zio, all right. But nevertheless, what he said here was true. From the Congressional Record, October 26, 1971, he said, "The time has come to reorganize the United Nations for the anti-American, anti-freedom, recognize." Geez, my eyes are giving me trouble tonight. Sorry, guys. "The time has come to recognize the United Nations," he said, "for the anti-American, anti-freedom organization that it has become." Well, he got that part wrong, didn't he? He said it's become that. Oh, please, man. And so his solution was to recognize this and maybe to work to fix it. Get rid of it. It didn't become that. It was always that. It was always intended to be that. Nevertheless, he went on, "The time has come for us to cut off all financial help." Oh, yeah, absolutely. That time, he said, was back in 1971. That time was back from its founding, but nevertheless, guys, we should have never founded it or funded it, right? But did that stop in 1971? Did it even diminish one iota? No, no, not at all, baby. Not at all. We're the biggest funder, the biggest supporter of the UN, biggest supporter of the World Trade, the World Health Organization, right? He said the time has come for us to cut off all financial help, withdraw as a member, and ask the United Nations to find a headquarters location outside the United States that is now in keeping with the philosophy of the majority of voting members, i.e., communism is what he's talking about here. That's all it is, guys. It's a communist enterprise. Someplace, he said, like Moscow or Peking. So there you go. He's making it clear what he meant by that. It's a communist enterprise. Of course it is. Look at all of its secretary generals over the years actually admitting that they were communists, right? Uthant, for example. Kurt Waldheim. God damn, can't get more communist than that bitch of a system. Look who created it. The inventors of communism. Here's another quote. Edith Kermit Roosevelt, granddaughter of President Theodore Roosevelt, from the Indianapolis News, December 23rd, 1961. She said, members of the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, want a one socialist state, world state government by experts, she said, like themselves. She's right, what she said here. They seek policies which favor gradual surrender of United States sovereignty to the United Nations. Was she genuinely opposed to it or just pretending so people would rally behind her? That's anyone's guess. But nevertheless, seeing that she was a Zio, I would say that's the case. But nevertheless, guys, it is true what she said, right? The United Nations was seeking this, always has sought this. And again, that's way back in 1961. Here's another quote. This one, where the hell is this from here? Dr. Dr. Cameron, yes, the Canadian psychopathic psychiatrist who later earned fame for his psychotic mind control experiments under their, MK Ultra program, right? Which I've talked about a while back. Anyway, this is from a speech that he gave entitled "The Building of the Coming World Order," aired live by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the CBC, back on May 5th of 1946, way back in 1946. Here's what he said. The United Nations deserves the support of all who are concerned with the building of a new world order. Well, how about that? Are you concerned with the building of a new world order? Well, if so, then yes, the United States, I should say the United Nations, is deserving of your support. You should support it if you want the New World Order. Wow, man. Wow. No surprise coming from this source, right? That evil little bastard. He was even more sick and twisted than Gottlieb himself that ran the MK Ultra program. I'll talk about him some more down the line. Anyway, the last quote along this line that we'll look at is from Senator Jesse Helms addressing the UN Security Council on January 20th of 2000. Had this to say. The American people see the United Nations aspiring to establish itself as the central authority of a new international order of global law and global government. Americans look with alarm at UN claims to a monopoly on international moral legitimacy. They see this as a threat to the freedoms of the American people and a claim of political authority over America and its elected leaders without their consent. Of course, that's how the Zio criminal son of a bitches operate. It's how they always operate. They trick you. They deceive you. They misdirect you. And while your attention is in the wrong place, bang! They foist it on you before you ever had a chance to even know what was happening. So that by the time you open your eyes up to try to see what the hell happened, it's a done deal. It's already in place. Anyway, he went on to say, as the UN seeks to impose its utopian version of international law on Americans, we can add this question: where do we go when we don't like the laws of the world? Exactly. A United Nations that seeks to impose its presumed authority on the American people without their consent begs for confrontation. Absolutely, baby. Was he right or was he right? There was a point I was going to make here. Let me just skip back a second in this quote. Oh, okay, yeah, that's what it was. When he asks the question, where do we go when we don't like the laws of the world or the UN, its world government system? Precisely. This is why, guys, regardless all the rhetoric that they pump the public with to try to sell their Jew world order, oh, it's a great thing, we'll all live in peace, there won't be war anymore. How many times have they said that, right? That's what the UN is supposed to be about, right? The end of all wars. Again, what does that mean, the end of all wars? It means the absence of all opposition. It means surrendering all your frickin' weapons, giving them a monopoly of weapons, and therefore no more war. Because no matter how oppressive it becomes and how much you don't like it, you won't be able to wage war against the son of a bitchin' system, right? Because they have all the weapons in their hands. That's their version of goddamn peace. But in any case, right, let's just play make-believe for a minute and pretend that everybody who has ever been involved in pushing for world government has the highest aspirations for mankind. They really are all about peace and harmony, blah, 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 blah. Let's just pretend for a moment that that's the reality here, okay? You still should never support the concept of world government. God frickin' damn it. And why? Because absolute power corrupts absolutely, doesn't it? And once it becomes absolutely corrupt and you have a world system of control in place, now there's no place to run from its tyranny. You see the problem? All systems corrupt eventually, especially when you got hook nosers in the mix, right? That's a guarantee. But even if there weren't hook nosers pushing this, right? Again, let's just, go along with this little fantasy scenario here. Let's say that everyone pushing for world government has the highest aspirations. They're very trustworthy. Again, guys, it should be resisted with every ounce of vehemence in you. Because the minute the goddamn thing is in place, if it isn't corrupt today, it'll become corrupt tomorrow, right? It just so happens that all the son of a bitches pushing for it are corrupt today. But even if they weren't, world government could never, ever, ever be a good thing. Do you understand? Oh, yes, it sounds good, right? But it never plays out. It never could play out as something good, ultimately. And, I'd give the thing 3.2 seconds before the thing became corrupt, and now they're abusing their authority, and everybody on the planet is now subject to their control, and you can't do a goddamn thing about it. You can't run to get away from it. There's no place to find solace or sanction, right? The whole world will be under this tyranny. Look at goddamn COVID. Where could you go to escape that bullshit, right? Maybe, some out-of-the-way town in South Dakota. They didn't have, mask mandates and vaccine mandates there. But it's basically a desert, right? Where the hell are you going to go where you can actually, live comfortably and be exempt from their tyranny? There isn't any place under a world government. And by the way, with a world government, you wouldn't even have some out of the way town in South Dakota to escape it. It will be enforced everywhere. What went on with COVID was just a faint sampling of what we're headed for. There almost was no place to go to get away from it. But under a fully fledged world Zio-controlled son of a bitch in government, or any world government, right? Once it's in place and they pass laws, you cannot run anywhere. Do you see why? The concept, it's an abomination, right? It's like communism. The way they sell it, if you're a dumbass and don't know any better, it sounds good. Well, yeah, everybody has everything common. Everything is distributed evenly. It sounds great. It sounds like a utopia. Oh, right. Except when you look at how communism has always played out everywhere it's ever gone. Do they evenly distribute everything? Right. After they rape and pillage everyone and line their pockets with all the bulk of the wealth of a given country, then they evenly distribute so that everybody has at least 2 or 3 cents left in their pocket. That's their idea of fucking... Well, there I go. Well, screw it. There goes your idea of utopia right there, guys. Utopia is for them. They have all the power and all the money in their hands, and everybody else has what little bit left they decide to distribute out to everyone. Everyone has it all evenly distributed so that, yeah, everybody has everything common, all right. Nobody has anything but them. Which is why Klaus Schwab talked again and again about how by 2030, no one will own anything and they will all be happy. Yeah, there you go. That's what it's all about. You'll be happy owning nothing while they own everything. That's how it's always played out. That's how it always will play out. That's how they intended it to play out. And if they have their way, yes, it will play out that way. God damn it. And that's what the UN is all about. The communist UN. Sorry for the F-bomb. I do try to avoid that. But, there are occasions where it just slips out there. The UN, of course, is not only out to destroy national sovereignty, but it's also striving and succeeding in flying colors in destroying individual sovereignty, right? They don't just want control of all the nations. They want control of every goddamn citizen on the planet. One of the things they've been doing in that direction is destroying children's loyalties to their parents and to their country, as well as circumventing parental authority. I've talked about this before, but let's go into it in a little more detail now so that you can see they're not just after controlling nations. They want control of every goddamn citizen, and they start with the children. UNESCO is all about controlling education on a global scale and molding the mind of the children. So by the time they reach adulthood, they're basically mindless drones strung out on Prozac or Ritalin who can't think for themselves anymore. We're pretty much there, aren't we? One particular measure that the UN has undertaken in pursuit of this goal occurred on November 20th of 1989 when the General Assembly unanimously voted in favor of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which outlined what has become the UN's official policy on child rights. Article 3 of the convention states that in all actions concerning children, the best interest of the child shall be the primary consideration. Oh, it sounds so good, doesn't it, on the surface, until you start to dig deeper and you realize what this actually means. Who decides what's in the best interest of the child, by the way? Well, as we move on, it gets more draconian. Article 4 tells us that this treaty is not just a positive affirmation, but that it is to be implemented under the force of law. Now the tyrannical fangs, horns, and claws start to come out. To further show how serious the UN is about enforcing its rights of the child as law in countries around the world, UNICEF's report, The State of the World's Children 1997, stated that, quote, once a country ratifies the Convention on the Rights of the Child, it is obligated by law to undertake all appropriate measures to assist parents and other responsible parties in fulfilling their obligations under the convention. Fulfilling their obligations sometimes requires states to make fundamental changes in national laws, institutions, plans, policies, and practices to bring them into line with the principles of the convention. Do you see what this is saying? We are calling the shots here, yeah? And each nation is obliged to change all of its laws and its policies to be in line with what we are saying and commanding and dictating. Listen to this, guys. It's a tyrannical system of Jew control on a global scale. And this bitch government of ours is one of the leaders of the pack of this whole son of a bitchin' operation, pushing for it, right? UNICEF also stated that the convention, quote, makes it clear that children shall be protected from all forms of mental or physical violence or maltreatment. Again, sounds good, right? But it goes on to say, thus, any forms of discipline involving such violence are unacceptable. Violence? They're calling here corporal punishment, spanking your kid on the ass. Violence. Parents don't even do that anymore. I'm not saying beat your kids, no. But, for thousands of years, parents would tap their kid on the ass when he got out of, or she got out of line, right? It was a good way of curtailing bad behavior. They don't do that anymore. Why? Because they're afraid they might get arrested for child abuse. Just tapping. I'm not talking about beating hard, getting a club, or winding up and wham, 5 or 6 times. No. Just a tap on the ass, right? Parents are afraid to do that. They're afraid they might be seen and might be turned in, and the cops are going to get called, and they'll have a child abuse, stain on their record, right? Where does this come from? Who put this fear in them? And who's responsible for law enforcement now going after parents that simply tap their kid on the ass? The goddamn UN. And you know why? You know why? It's not about concern for the children that they're being abused. They know goddamn well that a tap on the ass is not abuse. You know why they're doing this, guys? Because they know it's an effective means of controlling negative behavior. They want kids to rebel against parents. That's part of their agenda of breaking up the family. So kids have no loyalties now to parents and will be more likely to be loyal to their teachers that have stepped forward and taken the place of the parents in instilling moral standards in kids, right? Article 29 of the Rights of the Child establishes that discipline must be administered in a way that will protect the child's human dignity. Again, it sounds so endearing. Break out the goddamn violins. They're concerned about the child's dignity. These are the bastards who want to get your kid's sex changed, right? Oh, that doesn't violate their dignity. Get your little wangy chopped off, or add a wangy if you don't have one, right? Are you friggin' kidding me? Oh, these son of a bitches, guys. Look how they weasel their way through things like the UN into every single aspect of human life, right? To screw it up. That's all they're about. To screw it up. To turn it upside down. They love it. They don't just want to kill off a large percentage of the population, but those that survive their little death-inflicting schemes, they want your life so completely wrecked you can't even breathe anymore, right? They're not happy unless they're screwing you over in some way, shape, or fashion. In every way, shape, or fashion. This is precisely the reason why, again, spanking children out of discipline is being called abuse today in the US, right? And other parts of the world. It's actually, forbidden. It's considered, uh, a sign that you're a bad parent. Again, I'm not talking beating, right? But just a tap on the ass. That's considered abuse now. Oh, no, it isn't. This was, until recent decades, the common method of discipline, right? And even though, yes, obviously, parents on occasion have gotten carried away and have, in fact, abused their kids and destroyed their dignity, that was relatively rare. And, in a way, it's good that, yes, attention has been brought to that to curtail abuse. But no, to the point now where parents are afraid to discipline their kids. Hell, never mind tapping them on the ass. They don't even discipline them at all in any way, shape, or form anymore, right? They let their kids do what the hell they want. And then they wonder why at 18 they're on drugs, dealing drugs and getting pregnant and getting arrested for busting into the corner store, blah, 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 blah. Because you didn't raise them with any standards. You were afraid to. You let, the UN and other institutions manipulate you into thinking that you're doing wrong by, disciplining your kids. Children in recent years have often been taken from their parents because of corporal punishment, right? Which brings us to Article 9 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which dictates that, quote, a child shall not be separated from his or her parents unless competent legal authorities subject to judicial review determine that such separation is necessary for the best interest of the child. Well, that's a blank check, isn't it? On the one hand, it says children shouldn't be taken away from their parents, and yet look how many times children have, in fact, been taken away from their parents. Jesus Christ, in California now, kids can get taken from their parents if the parents deny them their right to receive a sex change, right? This is a direct outgrowth. Shit like that is a direct outgrowth of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. There you have it. The ones to decide whether or not it's in the child's best interest to be taken from the parents are the psychopaths pushing, LGBT, for example, and all kinds of other sleazy horse shittery, right? The competent legal authorities subject to judicial review. Yeah, the criminal hand-picked community leaders subject to judicial review by other hand-picked scum at the top working for the Zio criminal bastard crime syndicate. How do you like your New World Order now? How do you like your UN oversight now? Son of a bitch. It all comes from there, guys. Look no further. You want to trace it to its root, all of these problems, all of these changes in our laws that are off the wall? So many people are like, I don't understand it. What? Things are so crazy the way they're being run. Oh, you can understand it. You can certainly understand it, why it's crazy. And you can see exactly where it's coming from if you do a little digging. That's all. That's all that's required. Stop listening to the Jew-controlled media every night and start, doing some research. And you can figure it out. It's not a secret. It's all public record. It's out there. How interesting, though, that in this age of saving children from getting an occasional tap on the ass, delinquency and disrespect among kids has never been higher. Do you suppose there's a correlation? Article 7 requires all parents to register their children at birth. Oh, yes. That's in the interest of the child as well, isn't it? Register so we can monitor everything now. Article 13 bestows a virtually absolute freedom of expression on the child, including the right to, quote, seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally or in writing or in print, in the form of art or through any other media of the child's choice. Did you frickin' catch that? So this is saying now that any parent who denies their child access to any form of art, written, in print, or in art form, pictures or paintings, or any other media of the child's choice. Any parent who restricts their kids' access to any type of literature or artwork of their choice, that includes pornography, doesn't it? Of course it does. They're saying here that that is a denial of the child's right, and competent authorities would have the right in such a case to take the kids away from the parents so that they can view this art of their choice. In other words, you as a parent have no say anymore, according to the UN's own Rights of the Child document. You as a parent have no right anymore over what your child chooses to view. And if you do so, you're denying, you're taking away their rights and their dignity. And the competent authorities will have every right to step in and take your kids away so that they can view these, illicit materials of their choosing. Holy shit. And in the meantime, many schools provide these very materials to kids, right? Oh, you must be aware, guys, around the country, kids themselves have been noting and complaining about pornographic material being made available in their school libraries, and teachers even encouraging it, librarians encouraging it, right? Oh, have you checked out this book over here? You think that's crazy? Come over here and look what this book has. Holy shit. And who do we thank for all of this? Our friendly neighborhood hook-noser, that's who. Running the UN. And do keep in mind that all the while our government was invading country after country during the Cold War, supposedly to fight communism, this shit was going on all over the place in our country, right? We were led to believe that those phony wars were to contain communism so it can't come here and corrupt us. And all the while, communism was corrupting us here, wasn't it? All during the Cold War. Still goes on. But, the Cold War was specifically designed, we were told, right, to stop the spread of communism. And yet, look at the shit that they were pulling right here, guys. Through the UN, primarily. God damn it, man. And don't forget, by the way, that the NEA, for example, right, the National Education Association, the big teachers union there, their official journal, and I've read these quotes a while back when I talked about the NEA. In their official journal, many times over the years, they have stated that one of the belated objectives of education today is to remove from the minds of children the concept of right and wrong, the concept of morality, right? And so you put that together with this UN horse shit that we just read, that children will have access to anything, any type of art, any type of literature that they desire. And if parents deny them that, then, they can be considered abusive parents and have their kids taken away. When you consider that their admitted aim is to remove from the minds of students the concept of morality, are you surprised that they're introducing pornographic material to young kids in frickin', middle school and grammar school? Is it any surprise? Anyway, Article 15 creates, quote, the right of the child to freedom of association. Oh, so now parents will be considered abusive if they don't let their kids hang around with, troublemakers, right? Kids that are getting in trouble with the law, kids dealing dope, some tramp down the street, engaging in illicit sexual activities. They can't tell their daughter, oh, we don't want you hanging around with her. She's a bad influence. This is saying now, again, that you're an abusive parent if you deny your kid the right to hang around with any company of their choosing. Holy Holy shit. And in the meantime, they've introduced over the years things like cooperative learning in the classroom, right? Where the teacher assigns, a project. He breaks up the class into groups of 4. They all aim their desks at each other, right? And he or she will assign each group a project to work on for the duration of the class. And then the teacher gets to go sit at his desk on his fat ass and do nothing for the duration of the class while the kids are working, on their own in these projects. And then at the end, the last 10 minutes, they'll say, okay, time's up. Now you got to present your decision on this issue, whatever. Usually they'll assign them some issue that they got to make a decision on, come to an agreement on, right? Cooperative learning. You know what happens during those sessions, right? I'm sure they still do it, but this was something that was going on when I was student teaching years ago. The lowest common denominator in the class would wind up dominating the discussion, right? This is designed to get kids to agree to peer pressure, and peer pressure from the class clown idiot, right? To make him look cool and funny, and, he'd be cracking jokes. And I saw this happen. I saw it myself personally, how this shit was playing out. They designed it this way, guys, to bring down the entire student body to the lowest common denominator through shit like this. And we wonder why our standards are so low. Values clarification is another way that they use to break down kids' moral standards. They actually intimidate them to abandon ideas that their parents tried to instill in them, make it out to look old-fashioned and even silly, right? The so-called education system has been at the helm of this kind of bullshit, paid for with your tax dollars, and all at the behest of the UN, guys. You want to trace it to its root, look no further. That's where it all has started, and that's where it's all emanating from to this day. No wonder the Communist Party has always favored the UN. Notice what the April 1945 issue of Political Affairs, the Communist Party's official journal, had to say about the UN. And I quote, "Great popular support and enthusiasm for the United Nations policies should be built up, well organized, and fully articulate. But it is also necessary to do more than that. The opposition must be rendered so impotent that it'll be unable to gather any significant support in the Senate against the United Nations Charter and the treaties which will follow." We saw a quote similar to this earlier on in this discussion, right? You not only need to push the UN through propaganda, but discredit opposing voices so that it'll sail through. You can't sell it on its own merit because it's a piece of shit, is what he's saying, right? People will recognize it as a piece of shit. So you can't sell it on its own merits. It has no merits to sell it on. You simply have to lie and make it look good through lying, and then discredit those who oppose it so that it will look good in the minds of the dumbasses that don't look into anything. Just accept the propaganda at face value. Son of a bitch. And that's how it sailed the way it has, and still does. Check this out, guys. Back in 1999, El Presidente, Mr. Clinton, issued Executive Order 13107, which called for compliance with all United Nations human rights treaties, even those which have not been ratified by the Senate. He called for compliance with all of them, and one of them was, of course, the Convention on the Rights of the Child. There you go, guys. By presidential executive order. The United States has been the bitch for the UN, not only in its foreign policies invading country after country, but its domestic policies in enforcing tyranny on the American citizenry. You wonder why so many strange laws and policies have been implemented from Washington? Look no further, guys. They all have emanated from this Zio bitch enterprise called the UN. Look how they've been waging war on all of us, right? Not just in this country, of course. All member states of the UN have been obligated to implement such policies, and indeed have done just that. Oh, they're little Jew world order guys. it's almost fully in place. And I don't have to remind you, do I, that if they ever get fully what they want, we're goddamn screwed. We're done. We're frickin' done. You better hope that doesn't freaking happen. All right, guys, thanks for joining me. Still lots more to come on this topic. We'll catch you in part 3. Take care.